Good afternoon, everyone. And I thought you have very excited sessions from the morning. I hope I'll add one more to that tip of that iceberg. I know I'm standing between you and your lunch. So I'll make sure that I'll be little interactive as well as I'll try to squeeze as whenever is possible. Okay. Before that, anyone heard about accessibility or accessibility testing? 1, 2, 3. Cool. Okay. Made my life simpler even more. Okay. So I'll talk about a little bit of what exactly accessibility and then how is it really important in our life or wherever it is possible. Try to introduce some of the tools and then how do you test, maybe a little bit of a dev side as well as to the tester's standpoint. And also I'll show you like how the industry and what are the standards in the industry and what are the guidelines we're supposed to follow and how it is formed and all the things. I'll also talk about some of the code snippets, or also I'll show you some of the live demo on existing sites like before and after. Okay. A couple of resources, or you can also do some sort of certifications in these things, and a bit of a demand in some of the companies really. We call it as a trusted testers. If you go to Accenture, Infosys, HCL, India, US, wherever the place you have. Okay. By the way, myself, Subhash. I think Rachna was introduced to me. I'm having around 17 years of experience in various technologies, especially on Microsoft technologies. Currently, I'm working as a senior architect in Microsoft, and I'll tell like if it is that how I'm introduced to the accessibility and all the things. So I have worked in like various domains, taxation or like healthcare, many things, many technologies, service companies, product-based companies inside India, US, Europe, in many countries. Okay, anyway, so that's about a little bit about myself, and you can reach out to me on my LinkedIn profile and all. So how, maybe I'll start with like we won't really understand. I'm not going with a definition bookish as such. I'm just wanted to, hey, like maybe accessibility is something like you make any application, whatever you do is to be useful for everybody, right? What do you mean by everybody here? We can think of it. And you can also see these days, wherever you go, you will see, let's say, typical shopping mall you go, you will see escalators, you have lifts, you have staircases. It depends on where, what you use. You can see certain people cannot use the stairs, whatever it is, right? Like it's, yep, it has to be inclusive, and then inclusive with respect to the various people. We can see like what are the different people as such, or maybe before that, can you see any concern in this? Any problem in this slide as such? Fine. Not visible. Not proper. Alignment is not proper. 3 points. Oh yeah. Visibility. It's blurred. Color. 6. Accessibility is not there. Fair enough. Waste of the space. I'll bring it back that. You're saying something? Sorry. Coordination not proper. Okay, fine. Coordination, maybe it's on me because I just put the slides and all. But yeah, I agree with you saying text is also on me. But you can see something, there is some text. I'm not sure like if you can read like, what do you think the problem in this slide? It's exactly someone was telling it's not visible, it's no contrast and all, right? It's typically the typical color contrast concern, right? And what is then what should be the thing? Like now I know that there is some problem with the color contrast, but how can I improve that? What is the best, or what is the rule you follow so that it will be visible to all, right? What are the problems you said it will be solved? Depends on the text size. Use like foreground versus background, or depends on the large text. You can use a different ratio. Now I'll say like, hey, who will define these rules? Sorry. I'll say like, who will define these rules? Can I say like 4:5, or can I say 4.5:1? What is this rule? Who defines this rule? We'll talk about a little bit on that. So when you talk about like this thing, right, when you have a like different contrast themes, then we generally tend to use dark theme somehow, right? So oftentimes when you use a dark theme, most of the images will become blurred. When you use the email signatures with things, right, like GIFs and all images, then they become invisible because of the theme. So ensure that you have a right contrast theme. It should work in all the places. So we were talking about different people, right? It has to be accessible, or it has to be useful for everyone. You can talk about like few people have a visual, you're saying something visual. Could be like a near blind or maybe color blind, maybe fully blind. Does anyone work with the near blind people or blind people? Okay, lucky. So, or if not, you try to book a flight ticket by closing your eyes, then you will understand the pain of them. Okay, there are a couple of people who are having a hearing aids, right? You have a motor skills issue. Some people can have multiple, right? Deaf and dumb and all the things. In fact, even for us also, right? Oftentimes we will also be situational disability. Classic example, when I have laptop and I have water or a coffee, then I cannot open the door, right? And if you see, like most of the buildings and all the things are coming with accessible stuff where you can press the lift button using your legs, right? Like there are many places you have touchless and all the things. Okay. So considering this, maybe I'll show you some statistics. Maybe this is like little bit old data, but you have like, why do we really need to care about accessibility in such way, right? So first thing is business, right? All the companies look for a business, and then you have a lot of gap with the users. There are X number of billions or X number of millions of sudden disability or any one of the disability as such. And you can also think of some sort of a innovation, or you can think of some startup ideas or some sort of a things like let's say, how can I make every application accessible, right? Or at least how can I find that this is not an accessible application, right? Either way, it's a good. If you know how it is not, then you think of like, how can I make it? Can you make it at the end? Maybe I'll show you like what it is. So let's say you're talking about a first party application, which you are building from the scratch in your in-house company or whatever, right? Say, so when should I think of my accessibility? Should I think about at the end after pushing to production, or should I think a development phase? Okay, so it's a typical concern of, right? Like you find a bug in a production, it's always a costly. So you try to find as early as possible, typical shift left mechanism. The shift left can be as early as possible, but at least you ensure that in a design phase is better. And vision, it's just like you're thinking through when you're giving estimates and all the things, you also think through the accessibility and all. It depends on the application, but try to have that hat all the time. Okay, when you're like, let's say third party, right? When you're buying, let's say as a company, Thoughtworks buying some other product from someone else, then I'm not sure if you see that there's agreement, all this, does it accessible or not? If not, how long you can do? Or it's like, at least can you fix some of the critical bugs, right? Right, some of the things is always so you think if you're in a procurement offset, then you think of it like when you're buying any product for the company, then think of it accessibility in that angle as well, in that early stages, right? So when should I think of an accessibility, right? So as simple as that, if it is high has a UI, then you think of it. Let's say I'm working on a backend API. It is not even visible to anyone, right? Then I don't need to think of it. So if you have an UI, it has to be accessible. If not today, not most of the companies are not making or enforcing everything. But if you see typical big companies, tier one companies, this is one of the things. Everywhere you have like a requirements, development, testing, unit testing, integration testing. We also have accessibility testing, user story, whatever, in the Jira task or whatever. So accountability comes from everyone. Question? Okay, so accountability comes from everyone. In the ladder, we have seen that like everywhere it has to be considered by everybody. So the typical principles we can think through. What are those principles I can think of? Like POWER. Now maybe it's like a terminology. So it has to be perceivable. What do you mean by perceivable? We can say, and maybe I'll show with an example. Operable is like everyone should operate. My application should be operated by everybody. Similarly, I can understand what are the thing, like let's say you have a pie chart. I can understand differently, and then you can understand differently. Can we have a common consistency across the things, or common terminology across the website, or whatever the application and app, whatever in that case? Maybe if you heard of it, like minimalistic design is the best approach to go. Many people are leading towards that. Robust is like every assistive technologies. To talk about assistive tools, like something typical mouse, only can I use only application only using mouse? Can I try using keyboard only? Can I try only using joystick? There are people who cannot type, right? So many assistive technologies. I have a short video, but I'll see if I get a time, I'll play. So you have like a lot of tools which can be used by various people. Okay. So ensure that it has to be used by everyone, and provided it supports all the assistive tools. Maybe I'll talk about little thing again. Do you see any concern in this? This is typical diagram, let's say X and Y, something you can think of a stock price. for a weekly, whatever you can think of. Do you see any concerns in a, maybe we'll talk about visual impaired guy. Like, do you see any concern with this? You find out something? Values are not different, not perceivable anymore. Can you elaborate if not perceivable?
Color.
Okay, color. Different. Fair enough. Cannot conclude anything. Okay. This is one of the typical problem you're talking about, like not anybody cannot visualize it because it's all lines, right? Then they cannot understand the color difference between the colors, right? Now it's also fine. Now you also think like, okay, now you find, now you didn't understand that there is a problem. Now you understand this is a problem, then how can you fix it, right? How can you do that similarly in all the applications? How can you do that for every element, right? For considering all the impairment guys, right? So one typical solution you can think of, hey, instead of dots, I can put some square, rectangle, or whatever, one solution by one person, like this only it's given. And somebody say like, hey, I can use dotted, can I use dashed or something? Can I use, somebody says like, hey, why don't you mix it so that you will have, this is also one side of a solution. But another solution is like what you are saying, like not everybody can perceive it. I cannot even read whatever, I cannot say whether we put dot, dashed, whatever. So usually every graph, every report we put, you will also have another thing where it will have a tabular format. So you click on a button, show me the tabular format, then I can read. I can read, but I mean, I cannot see still, but I can still read using any other tools. Okay, so it's a one way, like I'm just trying to introduce like the problems and then see how do you think of it. And there are a lot of tools. I'll just talk about a couple of tools and all. And then especially when, how can I integrate this with a CI/CD? I'll talk about Azure DevOps and how can you integrate this in a CI/CD level so that it will be useful for the devs as well as to the testers to see, right? Maybe let me quickly go through that extension. So I'll show you one extension which is available in Edge and as well as to the Chrome. There are many other tools like text spacing, color contrast analyzer. There are a lot of tools, but more eventually all the tools are coming towards this one-stop solution. So maybe I can just show you. Yep. Okay, so you go to Chrome, then you will find this. You can search for accessibility extension, then you will see accessibility insights for the web. And I've already installed. If you can see, you can observe this on top. I have already installed. So how does it work and all, I can show you. It's very typical usage, which is like very simple usage. And it also gives you the report. You can say that, okay, your application or your web page is accessible at a basic level. 100% it cannot be. Okay, so I'll come back to that. What are the features of this? And then we'll go a little bit deeper. So what are the different areas we should think of it when it comes to the accessibility? And one thing you saw is like visual user is what we generally think through it. But the second one I also heard is like navigation, right? There are certain things where we have tab stops, right? And if you work before HTML5, then you know we used to put a tab index 1, 2, 3, 4 to make the order and all. But HTML5 onward, there's no tab order. As long as you put it in a semantic way, then it into the navigation panel. If you just use a keyboard, you cannot come out. Then we suddenly look for a mouse and use it to change the section to some other place. And the another one is like a screen reader. This is where exactly the concern comes to. This is like a more complex, and this is where the testers will come into picture. Today, you cannot see, not every tool exist in the market, like where you can fix the screen reader problem, or you cannot even find there is a problem in the for the visually impaired guy, for the hearing aid problem, right? So if a screen reader is like something like you have a drop down of countries and states, and you have to know which country you have to select, right? And then you have to tell like which is, or maybe you take typical date time calendar, date time control, right? So you have a lot of operations which you can do in the date time controller, like you use page up, page down, space bar, left, right, arrow, up arrow, down arrow, which one do you use? And then you have to, every control has its own mechanism of selecting today's or go to the calendar, years, months. So how can you think like if I close your eyes, and how can I do that? Can I select, or where am I? Because the fourth is, let's say if you have the, sometimes if you see that the calendar has fourth date, let's say 5th, and if you have a big one, then you will have a 5th from August, 5th from September as well. So which 5th I have to choose? right? So there are many things. If you see that, like, how can you make that every control, like even if you buy any control or even if you see any use third-party controls, can you make sure that it is still available? So that's where is a more complexity come into picture when you have this. So whether it is selected or is it available, is it visible, is it enabled, is it selected or not selected, right? So many things we need to know. How can I know that? And when I'm writing a code, you cannot see, right? And some of the things will render only on the DOM, right? Let's say if you select a state country, then only you can show the states, right? Then I cannot test, any tool cannot test unless until you do some automation as such. So this is one thing which where like still the testers put a lot of effort, and then identification as well as fixing is to equally complex to solve this. Okay, so what are the things, what are the tools, and then people test in general is like, these are the things, like you have various browsers, but the top browsers is like Chrome and Edge. There are a couple of things, NVIDIA, JAWS, narrator comes, I can turn on, but it gives it too much of noise. It reads every character. If you can try open Windows and then look for an open narrator, and it gives you, so you cannot even sustain with that. It comes with the Windows OS directly. So people try the Chromium with NVIDIA because it's like a freeware. That's where like most of the companies will look for that option, like, which means that if something can be useful with these two combination, then you can say that, okay, most of the people can use. I'll talk about like certain standards and all like that. Okay. Typically, when you talk about an Android application or an iOS application, you have a typical tools where you can use it. Okay. You can also use that accessibility extension for the Android as well. Okay. This is what I'm talking about, grades. There, each company can have their own sort of standards, but this is like a general standard, AA, AAA, whatever it is, like is, if you say like, at least people expect AA to be there, which means that you are solving most of the people. Meaning like, let's say there are two people, A and B, both are blind. It doesn't mean that A is satisfied, but B maybe not, because each one will have their own perception of the things. So AA is something like you're targeting majority of the people. AAA is something like you're solving most of the people, like your delightful customers you can think through. Maybe AAA is like a little difficult unless until it is like a so critical application, then you can think through, but at least AA is one sort, at least where you can make sure that your application is at least at level stand. So who will define all those things is, I think, I missed somewhere. Okay. It's like there is a WCAG, which will web content accessibility guidelines. It publishes list of tools and all the things, and then it also shows the list of guidelines and all the things. Where can I see the guidelines, and how can I know what are all the things I have to see? We'll talk about that. Simple thing is like, this is kind of a developers you see, right? Like you try to use semantic elements. What does it mean is like, you can write a heading with many things, right? You can use paragraph, you can use span, you can use label or anything. You put whatever the CSS you want and you can do it. But can you use H1, H2, H3? So that, right? So you can consider it as like a heading. So why it is important? It's because of the screen readers. If you click on a H, it says that, hey, you have these many H1s, these many H2s, and then you can switch between the H1s, and all. Like, let's say you are reading a newspaper. Now, can you go between the one article to another article, right? So if it is inevitable in situation like where you are using some third party, then you cannot modify the third party controls. So then you use the script at any given point of time, and then you add the ARIA label. So ARIA label is something like to the sugar coated version of like when you are using, if you are not able to use the semantic elements, you can just add something so that it's supportive. Okay. Maybe I'll talk a little bit. I'll rush these slides. I'll not spend not too much time on the slides, but I will spend more time in the demo. So if you select typical, this is very typical thing. You don't use duplicate IDs, which we know many times, but still if you have a huge HTML file, then you still tend to use a duplicate IDs. Then it will, then you have say like, hey, read this line for this ID. Then you don't know which ID to be used. When you think of that, who are using the screen reader technology tools, then they cannot understand what exactly it means, right? Similarly, every HTML should have a language attribute. It's a very, very basic thing, but we generally don't write. But when it's go to the HTML, it will automatically add. But or you have to write something, and it has to be like proper one. You see, like the middle one is like before, and something is like after, like improper and then proper one, or inaccessible and accessibility code. And if you see something like this, that's what we were thinking, like tab index. Now these days no one is using tab index, but there are certain people who still use a tab index to not to come into that particular input variable and all. I try to use the things, and I also like use the links span, on click. It's like if you see visually, right, all these things look same. But when it comes to this, like it cannot be operatable by the keyboard. If you use a span, if you use mouse, then only you can do it. So try to use anchor tags. Most of the people are like so mature these days, but still we can see certain issues in this area. Something like this keyboard trap, somebody like you put it in this and then it will be always in the navigation tab. I will talk about more in that. This is something whenever you are using anything, right? This is what is a screen reader, or where it comes like you have some sort of a checkbox and you have to know whether it is checked or it is not checked, it is enabled, not enabled. And then how do you know? So there's a various ways you can get to know. Either you create a role, and what is it role? Like you can, your roles could be button, right? Anchor tag, or like checkbox, radio button, and all, whatever it is. Right. So it's basically, these are the three things. Any control you go for it, these are three things which you need to ensure that it's what's the name, whether it is like something like save button, cancel button, whatever it is. And also similarly, what it is role, it's a checkbox, drop down, or like a button, or is like whatever it is, like you can think of what its role. You can define the role. If it is user primitive types, then you don't need to do all these things. It will be automatically there. Value, you can see like it's selected or not selected and all the things. Okay. Any questions in the middle?
Let us suppose a person is using a screen reader in order to fill up a form. And the form has some of the sensitive fields like SSN ID and all. Usually on the screen, whenever the person is giving the sensitive information, it is masked. So when we are actually doing it using the screen reader, how does it handle this trap?
But if you are okay, the question, I'm just trying to repeat the question so that everybody will understand. The question is like when you're writing something, if it is a sensitive information, it will be like masked. And how does the user can understand, right? So it's his only, right? It's end of the day. Let's say I'm entering my username and password. I should be knowing like what password I'm entering. Let's say my password is like welcome123. So maybe I missed capital W or small w, which I don't know. Maybe you can mask it, but I can still, when you're pressing the keys, it will tell me that you press W, or you press caps lock W and all the things. It will tell. So you will get to know like whether it is. You can also read by character, or you word by word, or you can read the sentence by sentence. So in that way, it is confidential, but with respect to that particular user, right? It is not for everybody else.
Yes.
So it's still the PII, the private personally identified information is always kept care.
Thank you.
Good. Any more questions? I just rushed to this. Okay. So there's certain places where you use this, right? Like phone numbers and all those things you can use. Sometimes you can use images. Images, you can think of static images and functional images. They're meaningful. So when you click on Office, it goes to the Office 365 page. Phone number, you can click, it doesn't go to make any call, right? So you always make sure that every image will have an alternate text. The typical reason is like when you load it in a mobile, you may not be interested to load all the mobiles. So let's say you are opening a India map on the mobile, you may not be interested to, because it takes a lot of data and all the things. Not most of the people doesn't want to have that. So instead of that, it will just show you the alt text is India map. So you don't need to load the maps and all unless until you really need it. Or even if I don't see, then I can understand like, okay, there's an India map in it. So similarly, it's a decorative images. It still requires an alt text, but you don't need to put anything because it just like put it for the sake of decoration, but you don't do anything as such. The second one is like you already have in a link. It is also functional image. You already have in a link. So the link will take care of it. So you don't need to put any alt text as such. I'm just showing very, very simple things. But if you go reality, then it will be even bigger things. This is what one of the examples we were thinking, like where you talk about, you use H1, H2 or like typical headings. Instead of you going for the div and then whatever you put, don't use any things as such of a styles or something like that. You use the semantic elements. So that gives a lot of things for the people with the visual impairments. They can switch from H1 and then they can read the heading. And if they like the heading, then they go for the next level. Otherwise, they go in for a next heading. So you click on H on the, when you turn on the narrator on this, then you can see that they go to the next topic like that. Okay. And something like that, you have some sort of I'll show you some of the examples rather than talking. Okay. Typical. These are some examples, like you use a table instead of you use a div and all the things, you always use the table TRTH. If at all you are not in a position where you are using some third-party controls, so where you have to use a div, then you try to write the script that you always in a position to inject the script, right? You can inject the script of area labels and roles and all the things so that it's still being accessible. And in a way, like you cannot make everything is 100% accessible when it is a third party. Another thing is like we also see, right, like some of the times like the first the first image doesn't give me any problem, like red color is an always error, green is always success. But think if somebody cannot see, then they cannot understand whatever it is. So maybe you can put something like this, the pop-up text or something when it is saved, something you can say that is successfully saved, not just with a green header or green progress bar. Some of the things. Let's go back and the things. We'll come back to this and all. So I'll show you that the tool I have already installed. Just see how can I. Okay. I'll just having some difficulties. Okay, maybe I'll show you some of this when you can go, there is like two home pages. You can see this home page, right? And there's another home page, which is like accessible home page. And you don't see any difference between these two, right? From a visually, you don't see any difference. Fair enough. Do you see any difference between these red when I open this page and that page? Okay. Anything? So, okay. So apart from that, you don't see much of a difference. But when I run this tool, let's say I'll run this tool, you just go for this. And then there are a lot of tools, but you can think of this. Let's say I just run fast. What it does, it just go away into the tool and then it talks about what are the issues it is having. It shows that there are 44 concerns in this entire website. And then you can see like what are all the things. The color contrast concern, there is HTML language concern, then image, there are 33 images which doesn't have an alt text. You can see something like that, link name, select name. If you want to know like, hey, where is this is coming from, then you can go back here. Then you can see it shows like this is all the places where the concern is all about. Then you come back and then click on this. It will show you what it is. Okay, then it has like this image doesn't have an alt text, and you can see this is a WCAG. This is a standard where you can go and understand what this rule is all about and how much you have to put and what needs to be put. You can inspect the element as well. Let's go back and then inspect the element. Okay. Need the styles. 1 second. Okay. So let's say I'll pick this one, whatever that welcome city lights or something. So it says there is some error, right? And you see here, right? Like they used paragraph and then use some class as a headline. It looks like a heading, but it's in reality, it's not a heading. Then people will think that it's like some paragraph and all, right? Similarly, you can see there's an image, there's no issue. And you see something like this, there's a phone number. Maybe you can see the annotations as well. Okay, so there is a phone number here. So there's a phone number which is used as a text, right? And then you have you can inspect. Okay, so it doesn't have a link name. Okay, and similarly, you can, okay, let me go one by one slowly. Let me know if it is too fast. If you switch between the pages, then you just start over and it will show you all the things. If it is like you feel like there's too much noise in this, then you can just stop this. You can go through, you can get rid of all the things. And then you just, let's say you go for a maybe color contrast for one of them. Then you just wanted to see one of them. So it will show you only that particular image where it is having the issue. So you see there is something. More city is the one where it has a color contrast issue. And then these days, if you see, right, that even the developer tools are smart enough, it will show you those as well. If you hover on this, you can see the color contrast. Also, it shows like there is 3.88, and which is the one which we saw something like it has to be 4.5:1 something. It also shows that there's a red icon where it shows like it is not accessible. You can see this accessibility section as well, right? And maybe we can just switch and then switch to this page. And we can see the same things. Especially maybe we can come here to you can see here, right? So it is created using H1 tag. right? So these are the things can be identified using the tools. So whatever this tool identifies maximum of 20 to 25%, but still it requires in a manual testing where it is like, can I use like, what is this quick menu? What are all the things inside? Is it really written properly? Can you select, when you select, it shows that it is what is selected, or something is already selected and it is showing that it is it telling that it is something is already selected and all, which you cannot not get it here, right? Similarly, if you go to any of these things, like you see this, right? Like this is one heading, and then you also see this is like phone number is written as a text, right? Similarly, you can go to the table and many things. You see here the color contrast ratio. Maybe you can come here. You see here, right? There's a contrast ratio is a little different here, and that's where you see it's like a green icon, whatever it is, you can think of it. Fair enough. And maybe you can this is like a typical website. It is publicly open, then you can take this and then you can play around it is with the tools and then see before and after how it is working, and then what are all the things it was the typical thing, and then you can see what it is. Maybe if you want, you can go with couple more things into this, but whatever, end of the day you go into this, then you can see many of such things like table and all the things. Okay, so you have a table, you will see the same problem before and after. And then whenever you switch this thing, then it will say that like, hey, you have to start over from this, and it will show you like, we chose, I think the accessible set, it will be like 0. So it's like there are no issues with this. Okay, so this is one thing, but let's say now I wanted to understand what all the rules, where can I do? Let's say I wanted to, let's say I'm wearing the tester's hat. Now, how can I know, like given on a web application, like how do all the things have to do? Right? Whatever I said is like just like maybe like hardly 10 rules, but this is not the 10 rules are limited, right? Like you can go to this and this tool, it has like a assessment, you can think of it. Okay, so you go here. This can be done for anyone, but you can just go with the assessment. And inside this assessment, you have all the things. So you go for this, you have a keyboard, and then what are all the things to be tested? And you say like pass or fail from everything. For every step, you can say like, is the keyboard navigation is fine? That's where you go for the tab, shift tab, and all the things you tested in that respective application. And then you can say like pass or fail, and you can put whatever the things you want. You can add comments and all the things. Okay. So when it is failed, then you put what are all the failure instances where it is happening, and then you can add all the description, all the steps how to reproduce for the user, and you can export it as in a all these results can be exported, and then you can give it back, or you can raise in a, if it is if you're using Azure DevOps, then you can integrate it with the Azure DevOps so that you can raise a work item or like bug, whatever the Jira tickets you can also raise to that. So all these things you can see, like you can see like whenever you have getting into the keyboard side, you have these many things, and when it comes to the focus, then there are a couple of things. Landmarks also, I'm not sure if you know the landmarks, then you have a sections. When you're writing HTML, you will write a sections and all the things, so that you can get between cross between the sections. So you can see all these things. There are like various sections you can see, and then each section you go back and then see like whether every page is really accessible or not, and then you can create a report on all together. Okay, this is one thing, but this is one thing at tester standpoint. But let's say I'm a developer, I can also use it, right? Like when I'm developing itself, I can also use this. And then when the local host, for you and me, the difference between is like I'll be using local host, maybe for you it's like a hosted environment. So when I'm using a local host, also I can do it, right? Things like you can think through like some of the tools you can develop. Like let's say I don't want to host it. Can I use some sort of a phantom JS or some sort of a headless browsers, and then which will tell me as soon as I write, right? Like say I'm writing, can it tell me that typical compilation errors you get, right? If you're writing any C# or Java code, like you don't put a semicolon, it says that there is no semicolon. I no need to wait until the compile to be happen. So you can think of some tools you can build on top of this. This all runs based on Axcore. Axcore is a one typical JavaScript. Maybe I'll give you all the links to the end. It's an open source and anybody can use that, and then you can build any applications on top of it. Okay, so another as like you're saying like is it hosted on iOS, Android, or is it hosted on any websites, or how does it?
Python web app. An app developed with Python.
Underlying technologies doesn't matter. As long as it is hosted, then I'm fine. Which framework am I going to use is important rather than what language. Let's say I'm using an iOS. So there will be a different tool, but end of the day, it's you can
Platform independent.
It's platform independent. It has you host it because it typically deals with HTML. Right? HTML is like you can write it in Notepad as well. Right? As long as you open in any browser, you can do it.
The apps developed in Python, it won't support.
Okay. So if it has a UI, and then if you can host it in a browser, and I'm least bothered whether it is built it on ASP.NET JSP or.
So does this plugin reports the accessibility issues only on the page that we opened, or will it? So for a typical enterprise product, we will have multiple pages, right? So do we need to manually navigate to every page and start recording and looking for the report, or is there any possibility where it automatically navigates to the pages and find all the issues and come up with a report?
Okay, good question. The question, I just wanted to repeat the question for the online guys. So just like, do I need to do it for every page? Let's say I have 1,000 pages. Do I need to do for every 1,000 pages, or is there any way for me if I can do the playback and record kinds of a concept? It's kind of yes and no. Yes, you have to do for all the different pages, but if you can do the automated test cases, if you write like, let's say I build this application in React, you can write an automated test cases, right? If you write an automated test cases, then you can just run that test cases, which internally you can call this plugin. It's just like a typical JavaScript. Okay. So what it does is like just you have a certain rules, and then you say like call this JavaScript in that test cases. It's let's say you're using an image. So it will go and check whether this image is having alt text or not, right? So that image maybe comes only when you click on some button. So that is automated when you write, and then your HTML page will come with image, and you'll see that image has an alt text or not. To answer your question a little more deeper, like you can, if you have an automated test cases, how can you run? Let's say I can also run, right? Before you come to the tester being a developer, I can also run before. And then I can say that if it is going beyond certain, let's say you say that, hey, maximum there are 1,000 test cases, at least 800 to be passed, then only I can take it. You can set up a baseline, okay, 800 test cases. It's not hard and fast rule 800, but maybe I'm deleting 10 pages, which is equally like it will come to 800, but it doesn't mean that I'll add a couple more pages. So, in a way, it's like some sort of pathetic work, but when it comes to the reality, because you have to put a lot of effort and a lot of focus whenever it comes to the screen reader things, you cannot avoid the manual testing, at least at this moment. Maybe if you have like more of a generative AI stuff comes into market even in future, but as of now you have to do. But I can do still automation with the test cases, and then you can run the test cases, and you can build these test cases. You can put these test cases in the build pipelines. I can show you just quickly that will answer your question as well. So I'll show you. No, test cases you have to write it. Let's say you have let's say you use any test framework, and then you use the test automated the test cases, and then you do it, and then you just call this plugin. I'll show you real quickly. I'll show you.
We have divide test around 1,500 tests will execute on daily basis. So if I wanted to check the accessibility as well on the functional test that I am running on daily basis, so can I plug it into our framework and see the reports?
Yes, yes. So this is one of my projects. So if you see, this is the extension which I added. And then you see this is a report, and you can see all the things like, okay, this is what it is happened. There is no accessibility issues in my build. So you can integrate into the, if you know that Git or Azure DevOps, and whenever I'm raising a PR, let's say I'm raising a pull request. So let's say I'm not even checked in, I'm raising a pull request. So that time also, if the other reviewer can find that there is issues, right, then he can straightly reject, like, hey, your PR is having accessibility issues, so go back and fix it. So he cannot go and then test, or he cannot go back and then see all the things, right? He can just look at this report. You can integrate this with the during PR process as well, if you know the pull request. It's typical code review time. And you can also do that. And you can also do, let's say you don't want to take it to the testing unless until if I submit this report to you, right? It's as simple as that for you, right? And this gives only the basic. At least I'm not doing the typical basic mistakes. Maybe I'm having a semantic issues, like typical functional test, right? You might be having something. But yes, you can integrate. And if you have, but you have to write the test cases. The other concern is like, if you go to the enterprise applications when you're talking, right? Enterprise applications always work with the authentication. So you cannot give us something like a unauthenticated, even if it is in a hosted, right? It will give a compliance issues. So how come this tool can log in, right? So it will not have any AAD authentication or not. You can create a one service account if you know like service principal or non-people accounts you typically create, right? Like dummy user, and then you can set up that with it, and then you can do. I'm show you something. So this is like typical YAML plugin. Typical YAML plugin which you have. If you know that YAML pipeline, CI/CD, and Azure DevOps, wherever you go, then you will have this is a list of tasks. You can run you can look for a task. You can hook this thing, and then you put what is the hosting mode. This is authentication one. You can say usually if you put none, then let's say my application is asking for the sign in, then it will fail in that case. So maybe you put a AD authentication and then you select that typical service principal. So if you know Azure or AWS, we never store secrets. So you have to put it in a key vault. And then how do you read from the key vault? So you can give a connection to the key vault, and then it reads the service principal, and then it gets the client secret from the key vault, and then it executes. Typically, you are mimicking a user in this world. So you can do, and then you can do that baseline thing and all. So you see something. So you can set up a baseline in while setting a task itself, and you don't have all these things. You can also see the download the accessibility report and all those things. And then you can proceed for the next level of testing. Fair enough. Any question? Yeah.
Gurguan has a question. Gurguan, please ask the question.
Hey, am I audible?
Yeah.
Cool. So I had a very different thought about it right now. I thought about that approach. Just verify if that can be done or not. So we were talking about parsing. I was thinking about parsing through the code at dev time only. So we can have an application which is separate from the product, and that application can actually parse through the code like a text file.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, HTML tags or Android XML tags can be differentiated, right?
Yes.
So based on that, accessibility reports can be generated at the dev time itself. Instead of rendering those into JavaScript browsers or anything, we can just parse the code as text, see if accessibility has been done properly or not, and just at the dev time itself, we can just flag out these issues.
Yes, and also no. And the reason, yes, it's possible because only when you are doing something, you can get it only the certain static things, right? Let's say I'm having an image, and then you can see that it's having a all text or not. Let's say I'm having a drop down. You cannot test something only looking at the drop down, right? But because I'm getting the states or something from an API, I'm just calling an API and then binding the data. So if you just have an HTML text for the list box, like what are the drop down, it will not even have any data, right? So that time you cannot test it just with the plain. Let's say you're saying like, okay, I just give a text, and can I use a pattern matching in the text, and then can I find it out? Yes, for the basic things, but for this kind of when you're rendering from a UI API, then you cannot. To the next level, you can think of something like where you can render, and then you can use some kind of a headless browsers because it required in a browser. So you think of like you can
prepare your application, and then we can go around with that.
Yeah, that's one aspect. And you can think of like a before it goes to that next level, also you can think of like a headless browser, and then you can randomly, you just need to host it, right? You can also host it in a phantom.js, and then once you have a DOM, then you can do this manipulation, all the things the tool can run. Does it answer your question? Yeah. Cool. Any more questions? Yep. Sorry.
Desktop applications.
Yes, you can also use more or less this tool. It's not yet mature, but you can still use accessibility insights for the desktop as well. You can. Yes. Good question, by the way. I didn't cover. Thanks. Let me check if I have any more slides. Yeah, this is certification you can think of. Trusted tester, it's freeware. It's a free, but it's like a lengthy process. It's like they will tell you the slot, and then you need to look for a slot, and then they will give you some content, read the content. Then next time they will give you exam, then you do it, and finally they will give you an assessment. I tried like 4 or 5 steps, but so it's like a lengthy process, a year process. They will do. This is like a costly affair, but if you want, you can think of it. The CPSCC is like a costly affair, like $3,000 something. So just think of it. I'm not sure about the money, but I haven't tried that one. But this is also easy to do. There's a hand raise from Google.
Yeah.
Somebody hand raise.
There are some websites where we use the 3D text, right? 3D text and 3D images. So have you encountered any use cases where how to test those scenarios, 3D text and 3D images?
So when it comes to the text, let's say if it is a text, I'll see like, let's say I'm a blind person, then I don't care whether it is a 3D text or a 2D text, as long as what is the text is all about, right? If it's an image. So irrespective of what the styles and all, can I read? Can I understand what the content is all about? Does it answer your question?
Yes. So one more question. So we will talk about the content part, the header parts, and somewhat all related to the website part. For example, I have some affiliate ads on my product on my website.
What
that thing?
Sorry, what did you add to the form?
Like on my website, I'm publishing some advertisements.
Okay.
Third-party advertisements, like affiliate integrations, for example. In that case, how do I make sure that that is also falling under accessibility?
Okay, so let's say if the is advertisement, you're talking about some flash screen or some sort of a video content.
Correct. It could be a GIF. It could
be. Okay. So it's simple, right? Let's say, what can I understand from that GIF? Maybe there isn't always like typically, right? If you put the example that you're creating a report of pie chart or creating a GIF, so you always have an alternate way to understand that. So most of the applications, if you see in a big companies, like they will always have a alternate way to understand that GIF. If the GIF, because I cannot see GIF, right? It could be very beautiful GIF, but I cannot see. Then is there any way for me to understand whatever the content in the GIF? So if you see typical video, right, you will have a captions and all the things for that. That was one of the reason. Maybe I cannot understand Korean movie, but I wanted to want to see the movie, then I'll turn on the captions, right? So as similar to that. If I can read what is in the GIF, but I cannot see, and then it's still fine. You can deal with the captions.
No, from the dev perspective, like if, for example, let's say it's an editorial website, okay, and the user is over there to read out some story content. And over there, I have some third-party product ads, AdSense, AdSense ads, or any affiliated ads of Amazon or the Flipkart or anything. So I want my user to click on that particular thing. At least he should be aware, okay, I'm getting some advertisements for bags or any product. If I select this, I will be redirecting to the third-party website.
Okay.
In that case, like how as a QA also and how as a dev, we make sure that our integrations are working fine. Content we can take care of, but that ad could be dynamic. Maybe I'm in India, so I'm seeing something else. Someone is in Ukraine or someone is in, he might be.
Like if I understand your question, so if you say that being in India, if I use something, then I will go to the Amazon.in, and if I am in US, then it will redirect me to Amazon.com. Then can I see that Amazon.in and Amazon.com both are accessible or not from my application? Is that my question correct?
No. The question is how the ad will be introduced to me. That it's an ad, because I cannot see it. So how the application will let me know, okay, this is an ad. If you will click on it, you will go to some other site.
Sorry, it's a little bit broken. So can you repeat the question?
I was asking how can we introduce the advertisements to the user, because I cannot see them. So there could be a possibility I might click on mistakenly if I don't want to go on that particular thing.
Okay. So you say like there is some link which you not sure that this link will lead to something. I don't want that link to be pressed by the user because it's not intended for the user because I cannot see.
Right.
Okay, so if that can be like, okay, so if I can't see, then it's always see this way, right? Let's say I wanted to, just to simplify your question, I wanted to call you, but I because I cannot see in the mobile, I wanted to call you a contact, but rather than that, I am calling someone else. How can I avoid this, right? In a way. So it's simple, right? When I'm doing this, the screen reader will always tell what is this link and what this link is intended for. So if you see that anchor tag will always have what it is for, and then where it is going. It could be anchor tag, it could be like some image with the link or whatever it is. Before I click, it will tell that what is its current state, what is its role, like is it like a link, or what is this link is all about for, and what happens when you click on this link. So after that, wherever it goes, it's a secondary.
The screen reader reads the ads as well whenever a pop-up
Yes.
comes.
Yes. If you see like, okay, to put it in ads or whatever, let's say you put some notification, let's say you submitted your ITR filing successfully, then it shows something on your this thing screen, right? It will read the notifications all the time. So that's it. If you see latest modern world, you put the notifications one by one and all the things so that it will read one by one. And certain earlier days, the notification comes and automatically goes away. So these days, if the notification comes, you have to explicitly close. Or you can see all the notifications, whatever have been, you come through. Let's say you have submitted the save button and you went for a break and you come back, then the notification came and gone away, right? So how can you know that whether this is successfully saved or not? So you can go back and look into all the notification on all those things. This is something like a usability issue, whether my application is usable or not. That is also part of accessibility most of the time.
Sorry to interrupt, Subhash. Is it something more needs to be shared from your end?
I think I'm good, I guess. I don't think.
Yeah, if it is,
I think.
Okay. Yeah, then let's have one more last question before we head to the lunch.
Yeah.
I have one question, sir.
Go ahead.
See, I'm in mobile application developer, and in my domain, I see that there are various kinds of ads and there are various kinds of providers. I'm continuing on the previous question, like if there are unknown elements, like in web, we know that whether or not this is an iframe, we can iterate through the SRC. We can basically, we can create test cases for these particular environments. What about the mobile? Like when we talk about native part, then we are actually just interacting with native elements. But now we have technologies like Flutter, we have React Native, which actually draw that UI on canvas class. So basically, even the screen reader cannot interpret what is on the UI. So what do we do in this particular case?
Okay. So end of the day, when it is rendering on a browser, it is a HTML, right?
Yes.
And also the screen readers are smart enough to read all the content, and it's easy for them to understand the HTML content. Similarly, if you go for the apps on iOS, it can understand the things. So that's where if you see that it attacks that in a HTML native side. So that whatever the language you come from, let's say I'm using a React, I can write whatever the JSX syntax and in the React. And then when it comes to this, it's a typical HTML content.
But that particularly does not answer the question, sir. Like if I have a recycler, suppose I have a listing of 35 elements, and the fourth element, I know being a developer that it is an ad. But the user or the test automation script which I wrote, it does not know that. So how will I proceed here? How will I differentiate between a normal element and the add element or any such element which is not particularly in that context?
Okay. So you say like in the automation, how can I know?
Yes.
So that's what I said, right? Like you cannot do everything in automation, but some of the things are still really required in a manual effort.
But still, it will be a major accessibility issue. Like if application comes to a production and the end user being novice, not knowing where to click, and as we have already stated that the user is blind and cannot see. So in this particular case, we I think we did a dead loop for ourselves.
Actually,
okay. So to answer your question, like maybe if I understand, like let's say you put the ad, right? The ad getting played on some action, right? So the question here is like is the ad is accessible or not? Then that you cannot be testing, right? Because that ad keep changes because of some backend data, right? If can I play the ad? If the user knows that clicking on this is launching the ad, is this fine? That you can make it in accessible. It's like that you cannot still make an automation everywhere. That's where the manual testing will come into picture. And when you say that is the production, you found that issue, then there will be like many other ways. You see like user analytics where the user have been clicked on this. You may not need to like, need not to be a user is a visual impaired or not, but it doesn't matter. We generally don't ask user what all the things you did it, right? It's always behind the scenes. We capture all the telemetry and then get to know like what this user is captured is all about, and then get that information and then see what is that is loaded. But if you can get to know till some ad is loaded, but that what is the, you can get to know what that ad is as well, but is that ad is accessible or not? Maybe not sure, right? Because that's not in your content. If you're putting in something in iframe which is coming from a different place, then you may not be in a position to test it in the reality.
Yeah. Thank you, Subhash. That was an informative session.